everybody. I am Dr. Deb. Welcome. And let's get started with our talk. I'm trying to get my lights to work better. I don't know. I keep playing around with the lights and whatever. I don't know. How are you guys? Oh, there was 2 people. And now it went down to 1. What happened? Okay, I'm Dr. Deb. It's Thursday night. It's 9 o'clock, and we're going to get started talking about cheating and why people cheat. There are 5 reasons that I came up with, which very frankly, there are more. There really are more. But there are 5 reasons that I came up with that all boil down to escape. People don't cheat because they want something nice. Yeah, it's nice, but they're really escaping. And the question is, what are they escaping? Those are my 5 reasons. What are they escaping? Okay, and the other thing I want to say is that cheating, like all the other stuff we've been talking about, like addictions, porn, anger, shutting down, all these things are due to trauma. There is not one single person who has cheated that did not experience some kind of or some level of trauma in their life. So then you have to ask, what's the connection? The connection is that when we do things to escape, and almost everything we do that doesn't work and makes other people miserable, is because we had trauma. So let's get into it. Item number 1. Oh, and before I say that, I need for you guys to join me and to hop on with questions. It's important for me to have someone to talk to, so I appreciate the questions. I appreciate the flow that we can have. Thank you. Okay, great. So, item number 1. A person cheats because they cannot tolerate the life they are living in or the trauma they used to live in, because the trauma will often break through to the present moment, and therefore it infiltrates the present, sometimes to such a degree that a person doesn't even realize that it's happened and that they're feeling like they're living in a past traumatic moment when in fact they're not. Many years, decades have gone by, and they're forgetting that passage of time. They feel like a kid. I once read a story of a lawyer, a very powerful lawyer, in downtown New York, Wall Street or something like that, who came home to her parents and she felt like she was 9 years old again. Powerful that she wasn't powerful enough to combat that feeling. So that is a form of escape. Now, what does it have to do with an affair? A person you're married to, no matter how wonderful that person is never going to make up to you for your own past trauma. You can marry and expect tons of love and get tons of love, and it will never be enough. Your marriage partner cannot undo the trauma that you've experienced. That's why Dr. Schwartz, in his, here it is, in his book, You Are the One You've Been Waiting For, a book for couples. You see how many tabs I've got here. It's a great book. Says you have to be your first healer. Yes, you want your spouse to be a secondary healer, and that's very nice. But you have to learn how to be your first healer. And depending on the degree of trauma that you had, the longevity of the trauma, the degree of some person supporting you in that experience, like a teacher or a cousin or somebody giving you that feedback that you're a really okay person and you don't deserve this something, the degree of which you either have or didn't have that will determine how much you can do that healing without help. Most people need a therapist so that you can be your primary healer and not your spouse. So now you're living with a spouse who's trying to be your healer, and old stuff is breaking through. For example, your spouse does something totally innocent, but it triggers a feeling you have of being unlovable. Why does it trigger that feeling? That's only because of what you've been through and the similarity of what your thoughts are now to what your thoughts and feelings were back then when you were hurt. So when that happens, the present moment feels unbearable. Now, if the present moment is unbearable, you need to escape from it, right? And so you can take drugs, you can do porn, you can do any number of things to escape. And one of the things that people will pick is cheating. Maybe they felt unloved, and even though their spouse loves them, their spouse is a real human being, which means they have flaws. They're not perfect. Only God is perfect, right? We aren't here on earth. So your spouse is not going to measure up to the fantasy you have of what you think you need. So you go look outside for it. That's the fantasy land answer. One reason for people cheating. So again, either they're having memories or flashbacks or not, but maybe triggers by the spouse who loves them of their past, and they can't stand the feeling. So they escape. Note the statistic, and I've said this many times, 75% of second marriages do not work out. And the reason is, as I just showed you Dr. Schwartz's book, we have to be our own primary healer. Before I move on to number 2, I see there's a number of people on now. Is there anything you want to add to that? Is there anything you don't agree with? Please chime in. I want to hear from you guys. Okay, let me go on to number 2. This is really different. Reason number 2 for a person cheating is they don't like themselves. It doesn't matter that their spouse likes them. The them, who they are, is not someone they like. And the problem is that the spouse knows who they are. In other words, they earned a reputation with their spouse for being them. And they want to be a different person. So the only way they can be a different person in their mind is to find a different person who didn't know them before so they can behave differently. And when they behave differently, they'll feel good about themselves. Then they'll go back home to the spouse who may still love them, but knows who they really are, that they don't like, and they end up feeling bad. All that good feeling is gone. Now, when you cheat like that for the purpose of being a different identity, When that happens, it can't possibly last. Even if you spend lots and lots and lots of time with the person you're cheating with, it can't possibly last. You go to work, you may have kids, you have your parents perhaps, extended family, you have people who know who you are. It can't possibly last. But when a person is in that place mentally where they can't stand the present moment for some reason, they don't think about that. They don't think about the future. They don't try to analyze what will be the most intelligent path for me to take. Guys, what would be the most intelligent path if you hated yourself and the best way that you knew to feel better was to be with someone else because then you could act different and put on a good show of being someone else? Yeah, I'm asking you, is that going to help you for the future? What would you say is the best way to handle that? Unlike Zoom, there's no lag time here. Good. Yes, it won't help. So what will help? What would you do if that was you? Because I remember in the Facebook group, I've had a lot of people, many, many, many comments. People don't like themselves. They hate themselves. At the core of many, many, many things that go wrong, like addictions and cheating, is that. Thank you. Get therapy. Really, that is my answer because it's important for a person to turn that around. Thank you, IFS. Thank you. Yes. And the reason why therapy can turn it around, there's a very good reason. There is no actual reason to hate yourself. There's no human being on earth who deserves to hate themselves. I was just reading a book today. A person had a very interesting case. She was a therapist. She still is. She wrote a book, and this was the case. This person is drinking. He may be also cheating. She didn't mention that. He hates himself. He can't stand himself. Well, they work together using IFS, and the man now understands very well that he has parts, and some of them are protectors, and some of them are little inner children that he hasn't really met. So he has a committee meeting in therapy. He closes his eyes. He imagines a conference table, and he has a meeting of all his protectors and all his exiles, everyone, all the parts. They all show up. And he has a protector holding a 3-year-old. And my golly, that 3-year-old looks just like him. And the protector is keeping the child, the little one, away from him. And another protector narrates the following story. Get this, guys. Following story. One day, an uncle of his reached down to pick him up when he was 3 years old. And at that moment, the uncle, who had a very fragile disc in his back, fell over on the floor in pain. And they had to call the ambulance, and he was rushed to the hospital, and he had to have surgery and never again walked well. Well, the man's 45, and for 42 years, he's been thinking it was his fault. Now, here's the beauty of it. Because they went back in time, he and the therapist, and he saw all his parts in front of him, he opened his eyes and he says, "You're kidding me. I know it's not my fault. How in the world could I have been holding that against myself? That's really crazy." Well, it's not crazy. See, what happened was the part of him that blamed himself for it was only 3 years old. That's how a child thinks. He thought it was his fault. And since nobody reached into the past before to find out why he was blaming himself, he himself, the grown-up, really didn't know. So now he could forgive the 3-year-old. He could explain to his inner child that it wasn't his fault, because he's a grown-up and he knows it wasn't. Everyone knows it wasn't. Only this little 3-year-old didn't know it wasn't. And by the way, that was a trauma for him. He sees his uncle, who he loved, about to pick him up, collapsing on the floor. That was a trauma for him. The definition of trauma is not necessarily that you're going to die and you're afraid you're going to die. It could be something shocking to the system that's unreal for you, like this story. So, tying that back in, if he hates himself, the question is, should he? Of course not. And when you get therapy, you always, I promise you, 100% of the time, you find that there wasn't a good reason to hate yourself. You didn't deserve it then and you don't deserve it now. Did you do something? Yeah, you might have. I've read stories of somebody who was supposed to be in charge of their younger sibling, and the younger sibling died. Whether it was a car accident or drowning or whatever, should that child, in the same book, actually, there was a 7-year-old running and chasing after his 5-year-old, and the 5-year-old fell off a porch that was too high up and he died. Even in a case like that, even if the 7-year-old was mad at the younger kid, should he hate himself? Should he? Let me read this. Get to the root, the start of the pain, the trauma, so the healing can begin part by part. Yes, thank you. So that's the point here. No one has a real reason to hate themselves, but the hater is an internalized child. It's either a child who's echoing an abusive parent, or it's a responsible child who took on something they didn't need to take on, as in the case of this 3-year-old. So now we get to the cheating. This guy goes and cheats because he hates himself and he wants to remake himself, and he pretends and he puts on this great show for this beautiful person that he's with so that he can feel good. And it lasts about that long. Even if it's taking a long weekend together, it doesn't last. So that is reason number 2 for a person cheating. Reason number 3, and this is where porn comes in. The porn industry is how many billion worth? I don't know. It's a shame, too, because it divides families. Yes, it serves a purpose. It's escapism again. But what a terrible purpose. It divides families. Anyway, the reason that I'm going to offer now is fear of intimacy. Now, you're going to say, wait a minute, they're cheating. How could they have a fear of intimacy? Isn't that sex? No. No. Think about it. If you could jerk off, forgive my language, to a screen, a computer screen, and back in the old days, to a magazine picture, then is that intimacy? Is that intimacy? Come on, guys, that's not intimacy. What is that? That's distance. It's the opposite of intimacy. You're allowing your body to respond, and your mind, of course, your brain is going crazy with it, to someone you don't know, to someone you're imagining. You're feeling the sensations in your imagination, which then, of course, triggers the chemicals in your body. That's not intimacy. That's what I'm saying. You know, if you're going to use the Bible and you get to Adam and Eve, it says he knew her. That's intimacy. He knew how she takes her coffee, no sugar, just milk. You know, he knows her. I just had a couple that I've been working with for a long time tell me that one of them said they're on the same page now, which is nice. They're on the same page. And he said, I can't count how many times we knew what the other person was thinking. Wow, that's intimacy. You got inside someone's head, not mind reading, just knowing. They didn't even have to talk. They looked at each other. They smiled. They knew, just like in the movies. That's intimacy. So when you're afraid of that, when you're afraid of the person getting inside your head, that's a fear of intimacy. Why would you be afraid? Tell me, guys. I know there's at least 2 people willing to chat. There's more people here. But please, all of you, chat. Why is somebody going to be afraid of someone else, the person they're married to, getting inside their head? Being truly vulnerable can be scary. Into me, I see. Yeah, exactly. Thank you both. Thank you. Yeah, it's scary because you're stripped bare. And remember, behind the fear of the intimacy is a trauma. The trauma was something where this person who's afraid of it was in some way exposed and hurt by it. And by the way, it doesn't even have to be something like physical or sexual abuse. It could be blamed. It could be simply rejected for who they really are. You know, the little kid comes home with the drawing and the kid says, see, I drew mommy and daddy. Look at my picture. And the parent is whatever, drunk, not well, says that doesn't look like me. I don't know, could be. No, that's not a good drawing of. Wait a minute, the kid is 8 years old. Give him a break. But that hurts. That's being totally open and vulnerable, to use your word, by showing this picture that you made with love and have it demeaned, have it dismissed, having the offering that you brought to the altar totally not appreciated, not valued. That hurts. If a child gets too much of that, they will grow up to be a person who is afraid of intimacy. A child who may be laughed at by the grown-ups, a child who may simply be dismissed and told, get over it or whatever. These kinds of things will make a kid tough and afraid of intimacy. So that's my third reason for cheating. My fourth reason, they may really not like something about you. They may not like that you are cold. They may not like that you're too after them and they feel smothered. There may be something. They may not like how you cling to your parents. I don't know. It could be a thousand things, but they also do not want to get divorced. This is called, I love you, but I'm not in love with you. I've heard this term hundreds of times. I love you. I love who you are, but I'm not in love with you. Why do they love you in the first place? Because you've had a history together. Why are they not in love? Something is turning them off that you do or stand for, and they can't put their finger on it. So they say they don't love you. They love you, but they're not in love with you. But they don't want to get divorced. They don't want to get divorced because they do care, or because they're children, or because they don't have the money to live alone and pay alimony, or because of their status in the community, or because of their job that they don't want to have the world know publicly that they're divorced. Let's say they're working in an environment where people are expected to be married, but they do care about you. So that's another reason. Now, if that's the reason, how the heck does cheating make a difference? How does it help anything? Let me tell you a secret about the I'm not in love with you point. I've had clients many times who will go back and forth. One day they hate the person and the next day they love the person. They're driving them crazy. I'm into him. I haven't had sex in 2 months. I can't stop having sex. What's going on? It's human nature. It is really human nature to react to what signals the other person is giving off. So personally, as a therapist, I don't buy that. I'll take a position of, you know what? I don't expect you to love them or be in love with them right now. We're just starting therapy. Give me 6 months, give me a year, depending on what's going on. Give me 2 years and we'll work on it. But if you two have grown apart and you care about them, but there's nothing there, well, let's put it back. You don't have to have an affair. Put back what was missing. Now, they may not have hope. The person who has that affair may just not have hope that putting back what is missing is possible. And my answer to that is, that's their trauma. See, that's another source of trauma. A person growing up, a child growing up, who's had so many disappointments, one after the other, they won't have hope. I'll give you the classic example. The little kid standing on the corner waiting to be picked up by a parent that does not show. Again and again and again. Either the parent forgot, or the parent was late from work, or the parent's divorced and wants to make a new life without that child. Statistically speaking, when a person gets divorced and remarried, they will tend to put more money into the new family than the old one. And the children get left out, their biological children, because they want to win over the new spouse, unfortunately. So what happens when a family is in the I don't love you, I'm not in love with you, and therapy won't help mode? It's because of experiences like that growing up that they lost hope. Hope has to be part of therapy in their life. And if they don't have hope, it's because they must have been hurt and injured every single time they expected something that did not happen as a child. And now we get to number 5. And this is crazy. This is really crazy. But there are people who think they need excitement. An example of excitement is stealing and seeing if they don't get caught. There are thieves, If you Google jewelry heists, you can get many books on the subject, and they'll be a fun afternoon read, but they're real people doing this. Where'd that come from? Well, that need for excitement is not a need at all. It's the same brain stuff as addictions. What happens, and this, by the way, has happened, unfortunately, the need for excitement happens a lot to vets who have seen action. When you're in a combat zone, your brain starts tuning in to the constant hypervigilance that you need to have to stay alive. And Basil van der Kolk, who I've mentioned many times, has talked about this too, that combat vets will sometimes feel edgy around peace and quiet. How about that? They can't handle peace and quiet because they're so overstimulated that their brain simply is unable to quiet itself down. And whether it's a vet or somebody who had too much excitement growing up in the house, maybe there was violence that they saw, whatever, they seem to gravitate towards excitement. So it's not that they do or don't love their wife, or if it's the woman, their husband, but it's all about the excitement of doing something wrong and trying to not get caught. Stories of kids who right in front of their parents will do something wrong, like spit at them or stick their tongue out at them, and then run away. And the parent can't run after them fast enough to beat them up. And they're hiding in a bush somewhere laughing because they got away with it. Well, why would they do that in the first place? They must have been abused. They must have been hurt. They wouldn't do it if they were loved. It just doesn't happen. Now, it's true. A parent needs to give discipline too. Sometimes a kid needs that. But it's only when there's over-discipline that they have that kind of nasty reaction. A lack of understanding of the kid, a lack of being there for them, a lack of validating their feelings, combined with over-discipline. So those are some of the things. Oh, look at that. I'm just about 2 minutes late. I'm good. All right. Oh, I see there's a comment. Shame, blame, and being discarded. Wow, discarded. That feels so hard. Yes. These are the things that cause that kind of childhood reaction that is traumatizing, which then leads to these kinds of escapist coping mechanisms. So that behind every one, and I urge you guys to watch this again, behind every single one of these 5 points is a reason in childhood that there was some kind of pain and trauma that was deep enough or lasting enough or repetitive enough that it created some kind of an etch in their mind, and it created their protectors to cause them to want to escape. So in the first place, the one of just fantasy land to take off pressure, they must have learned as a child that they could escape mentally, and they learned that, and it was the greatest thing since peanut butter for them, so they simply do that now, even if the person they're married to is great and they love them. The second one, they don't like themselves at all. They hate themselves, which again comes from childhood trauma. So they end up thinking that with a new person, they won't see who they really are. And the third one, a fear of intimacy, comes from being too vulnerable as a child and being slapped down in one way or another for it emotionally. The fourth one is a fear of confronting you because they don't want a divorce for whatever reason, and they do not have hope for therapy to work. And the lack of hope comes from their childhood experiences. And finally, the fifth one, just the need, which isn't a need, it's it's their trauma manifesting itself again. The desire to have, their brain cannot calm down. So they have a desire to have excitement. And it has nothing to do with their feelings for you. Yes, that is what I'm saying. Oh, thank you. You read me. This person is saying trauma is the true foundation. I totally believe that. You could throw away the DSM, the diagnostic guide. There's no such thing. Anxiety, depression, addictions, cheating, it's all trauma. Everything came from trauma. If you're only looking at the behavior, you're not going deep enough. And as I said with the story of the 3-year-old, what you as a grown-up think of as trauma may not be. I was working with someone, the only thing we could find was that this person was in a school with bullies. He wasn't even bullied himself. He was just immersed in an environment where he had to take care of himself to avoid being bullied. And that made him tough. That was his trauma because he was a little kid. See? So what's traumatic to the child is what counts, not what we think of as traumatic. And it could be worse, of course, but it could be very little, but that hurt the child. Any questions, other comments? There's quite a few people on. I'd love for you to also comment before I sign off. Thank you. All right, some people have told me, they've written me actually emails that they can't find how to comment when they're actually watching. So I guess that's a tech issue that I don't know. And then some people are afraid of putting out their name, and that's why you can end up creating an account where your name is different, or you have an initial or something. Because I love to hear from you guys. And you can always email me, drdeb@drdeb.com. Oh, hi. You have to be in the app to access the chat. What app? Oh, you mean you have to be, there's an app for YouTube that you have to be in. You can't just go to the link, as what you must be saying. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Okay. The right side of the screen has the comment within the YouTube app. Okay, great. Thank you for letting me know, and I'm sharing that with whoever comes on. So I appreciate that. And those of you who see this later, please comment. It's very important that you do comment, and I'll tell you why. Or subscribe or like. If you like what I'm doing, YouTube will show it to more people who can be helped if they see action. And you're using regular YouTube and it's still working, is what you're saying? I don't know what regular means. You went to like a web browser and typed in all right, I don't know. My link, yeah. Okay. All right. I guess it works both ways. All right. Thank you for that. And as I say, please comment later. The more comments, the more YouTube thinks, well, the algorithm thinks this is worth showing other people. All right, you guys have a wonderful rest of the week and a great weekend. You take care. Bye-bye.